Hello and warm welcome, dear audience, to New Generation Women, and I'm Jeanine van Seenus. I'd like to introduce you to a few radio shows which I produced before I started this channel. And the shows are really dear to me because of the talk guests and also the topics. I think them to be really special. So this is the reason why I decided to share the shows also on YouTube. Now, please don't be surprised if you hear different music and a little bit of a different setting. But one day I will go back to old school studio productions, yes. And I'm such an old school traditional radio enthusiast. I love to play with music, jingles, sound effects, and really make it a good quality radio show. We were trained to create cinema in the mind of our listeners. I bless Zencaster for podcast production. It's amazing, immediate, global quality. And yet, of course, it's limited compared to how radio was. But enough from my side. Enjoy the talk shows. And please do write any kind of comments, questions into the comment section on this positive note. And wherever you are, have a soulful rest of your day and hopefully hear you soon again. Hello and welcome back. Jeanine van Seenus. Today we're talking about one of my current favorite topics, personal growth and using or raising consciousness and using the system of the Enneagram. For those who are not familiar with the Enneagram is an ancient system with 9 numbers around the diagram. Enya means 9, and is today used as a personality typing system that I think is incredibly effective. According to the Enneagram, there are 9 core or 9 archetypal temperaments, the 9 Enya types, and teachers and coaches integrate the Enneagram as a method for self-understanding, self-development, and also for leadership programs within businesses. If I would have known the Enneagram 10 years ago, I would have saved myself from a lot of pain and aches, and I also think I would have saved my marriage, and I really mean that. So when I was introduced from a teacher or by a teacher to the Enneagram, she said to me, Jeanine, this is a landscape of your ego programs, of your patterns, a landscape of who you are not. And still when I was reading it, I'm a type 4, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so motivated to get that bullshit in quotes out of my system. Man Wilson, a wonderful spiritual teacher, said once, and she brought it to the point when she said, the truth sets you free, but first it pisses you off, and so it is. My interview guest today, is one of the finest teachers I know. He did everything that I always wanted to do. He was featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, BBC, Good Morning America, Fox News, Online, Mail Online, a psychologist, coach, teacher, author, host of the Chaos Radio, public speaker, considered Britain's most foremost expert on happiness, director of the Happiness Project and Success Intelligence. He is an expert on the Enneagram. Grateful to have you, Dr. Robert Holden. Welcome to London. Hello, Robert.
Hey, Jeanine. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Robert, what made you attracted to the Enneagram?
Well, the Enneagram, I think, flew under the radar for me. I wasn't aware of it for the longest time. I'd been studying psychology for many, many years. And actually, eventually, a friend of mine said, you should really take a look at the Enneagram. And I actually just kept thinking, no, I don't want to do that. There's so many things to look at. And it was actually on the day that I picked up my doctorate in psychology that in the afternoon I met up with my friend and we sat down in a cafe and she said, right, now I have your attention. I'm going to introduce you to this thing called the Enneagram. And after an hour or so of taking me through it, I was really interested. I was really surprised. I'd never heard of it before because it's been around a long time, 2,500 years. Mm-hmm. And I just happen to think it's really one of the most comprehensive self-awareness systems I've ever come across. And Jeanine, I think it's just supported me in every single area of my life. It's supported me in my relationships. It's supported me in my work. It's supported me as a leader. It's supported me in my health. It's supported me, I think, in my spiritual path as well. I really consider myself to be a student of this remarkable system, and it just keeps giving
growing,
me
growing.
Yeah.
And did you, at that time when you were reading it, did you think, why did I study for so many years psychology?
Well, I have to say, when I really went on my first program, a 3-day program with Russ Hudson and Don Riso, who founded the Enneagram Institute, I came away from those 3 days thinking, wow, I think I've learned at least enough in these 3 days to match a term, at least a term's worth of study when I was studying psychology. It's so insightful. It's so rich. And I'm a huge fan of it.
Yes, me too. And I've been part of your last workshops. I think what we all sense when you did your workshops with your partner, Russ Hudson, you just mentioned him, it's not the way what you say in the content. Of course, it's all about that also, but it's more how you present it. We all sense this integrity in you guys, the honesty. There's almost a way of being broken open. And the Enneagram is about from dropping from the ego into the heart. What did the Enneagram do for you?
Well, the Enneagram is a spiritual awareness system. And by that, what it really means is that, it's one of these systems which recognizes that our ego, our sense of a separate self, is fundamentally a self-image. And this self-image is not essentially who we are. Our self-image may point to who we are. It may be a reasonably accurate representation of who we are, but then again, it might not be. I mean, I think a lot of us, for instance, we know people who are in our lives who are very talented, but their self-image doesn't allow them to see their talents. We know people who are very creative, and yet their self-image really resists that creativity, perhaps, Mm-hmm. We know people who are very beautiful, and yet they can't see their own beauty. Now, the Enneagram, what it does is it basically sheds light on the personality, and it helps you to see that although you have a personality, you are not your personality. So the Enneagram recognizes that you have a learned self, the self you've learned to think of yourself as, mm-hmm. but you also have if you like, an unconditioned self, an original self, and that self can't be typed, by the way. We're not typing that self. That self, commonly referred to as the soul or the spirit or the psyche, that soul is too alive, too dynamic, too spontaneous to be typed. What we're typing essentially are the habits of the personality. And by typing the habits of the personality, it helps you to play to your natural strengths, your soul gifts, but it also helps to liberate you from unhealthy drives, unhealthy patterns, unhealthy fears, unhealthy inner blocks that are, in a sense, denying you access to your true self.
I was incredibly relieved when I was reading the Enneagram in my type. I was, of course, shocked in the first time. And then I thought, well, this is who you are not. So this is flexible. This is not static. This is, you can develop it in a healthy state. How was your reaction the first time when you read your type?
Yeah, I think initially I felt that somebody had access to my private mail. Or at least my private journals. I was thinking, well, how can somebody know that much about me? I'm trying to keep all of that secret. I'm trying to keep my fears and my doubts and my blocks. I'm trying to act cool in the world and try and get through okay, and so it was so well observed. Initially, I think it was a sense of almost like a shame and an embarrassment,
yes,
oh
totally.
My God,
yes.
This is like someone's taking naked pictures of my mind, and then it was like, well, hold on a minute, this could be good news, because if it's this insightful, then maybe it's going to show me a way through this as well, and it's going to help me relate better to my fears, help me to relate better to my ego habits, so that I'm not driven by these things. And that is one of the goals of the Enneagram. It's what makes the Enneagram so powerful, is that it isn't just about the personality. As you've pointed out, Jeanine, it's actually showing you that fundamentally you are greater than your personality. But that means, to be able to have a healthy relationship to your personality, it mustn't be sitting in the driving seat of the car the whole time. Sometimes it has to sit in the passenger seat, sometimes even in the back seat. And then hopefully with your greater self-awareness, you'll be able to show up in the world as a genuinely more loving and more open man or woman. And that's got to be a good thing.
And you said it so wonderfully, you almost felt caught. I had the same thing. And I know when I do it, the Enneagram with managers, they almost whisper to me, yeah, I'm a type 5 or I'm a type 6, but it makes me so predictable. And I always laugh and say, yeah, that's just shit news. Now we can work on it. So that they don't, that they don't take it so seriously. But this being caught, and so many people want to have the freedom to create and want to be free. But then we are so in the cage of our own programs. And I always tell them, look, the freedom starts from within. And here you can see that you're not free because you're always in reaction to your programs. And that makes them open their mind to it.
I like the way you say that, Jeanine. Yeah, I think that's it. This is a self-awareness tool, and as such, it's trying to help to bring out the best in you. But it will bring out the best in you by fundamentally also showing you where you are possibly holding yourself back, as well as also showing you where, you may have some innate strengths, some of these natural soul gifts that if you paid attention to them more, they would flourish more effortlessly and more easily as well.
This is about empowering you, and this is not about showing your lack, but it's about to empower you where you can flourish and where you can, live your potential, and showing you the blocks where you don't do it.
Yeah, the Enneagram can be taught in so many ways, and in a way, you could say that can be taught. If there are 9 types, then already there are probably 9 ways of teaching the Enneagram, just for starters. But I know for myself, I've really enjoyed taking a focus like happiness and saying, right, now let's look at the Enneagram through that. Or, for instance, beauty. When I worked with Dove and the Real Beauty campaign, we worked with the leadership team there very much on looking at how each of the 9 types looks at beauty. And I think that was an incredibly helpful thing to do. With my work with Success Intelligence, looking at success 9 times. How do we relate to success? What do we think real success is?
Today we wanted to talk about leadership and the Enneagram. Before we go into the different 9 types, leadership is, it starts with leading yourself first. How would you define that? Because leadership is not just about leading others, it's also about leading yourself first.
For me, leadership is everybody's business. Everybody, I think, is called to lead in one way or another in their life. So leadership isn't just a position. It's not just a pay grade. It's not just a job title. It's really more a way of being. And it's a willingness to show up more and more as your real self. And that takes great courage, but in a way, that's what leadership is all about. Courage,
and also, always being in the process of self-reflecting, because others show us mirrors of where we are and where we are not. You said it so wonderfully, leadership is not just a position, a role, it's a way of being. Do you have an example? Because in our crazy, busy culture, coffee-to-go culture, a way of being and leadership. Do you have an example maybe of someone well-known where you say he is the closest or she's the closest of being a leader in that way that I define leadership?
I could just tell you about a recent coaching session I had maybe.
Yes,
So I was coaching somebody who leads a very big business in Vietnam. And she is a type 8 on the Enneagram. And the type 8 is known as the Challenger. And the name the Challenger is all about really that people who have a type 8 personality tend to want big challenges in their life. They enjoy big challenges in their life. They also enjoy setting challenges for others. Type 8 personalities are often big characters. They enjoy the challenge of leadership. They are often leaders. They like that challenge. It doesn't mean necessarily, by the way, that they're good leaders. It's just that they like the idea of leading. Now, in the session that I just had with this person, she recognizes that she is a big character, and sometimes she has to get the balance between being an empowering person or unfortunately an intimidating person. And she has to get this balance right of genuinely empowering people rather than intimidating them with her big presence. She only means to empower people, but she's a big character. And because she's a big character, sometimes she can come across abrupt. Sometimes she comes across a little impatient. Sometimes she comes across a little hard-hearted, you might say. And she doesn't mean to do this, of course, but it's what happens sometimes when you're in the busyness of your day.
When they're so strong in their personality, to tell them to get a little bit more out of their own way so that they can be more observant and, let other people shine.
Yeah, it's like an 8 at their best is just, they're so powerful. But the power comes as much from their heart as it does from their thinking and from their actions. They are, you could say, almost truly powerful in that sense. They have a powerful presence. They're often trailblazers. They have a fabulous strategic mind. They work with their gut instinct in particular. They have a big, big heart and great willpower. They're often very resilient. And this is when they're healthy. When they're not so healthy, your challenges are almost the opposite of your strengths. So you become overbearing, hard-hearted, too controlling, and very often trying to force the pace rather than allow for something to happen. One example of a type 8 would be somebody like a Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, who wrote a book called The Strength to Love, and who talked about the importance of the power of love and leading in that way. Another example might be Donald Trump.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you would be a coach for Donald Trump, what would you tell him?
I think, the interesting thing about Donald Trump is that he has the power, the tenacity, the willingness to essentially stand up and offer an alternative to the professional politics in his country that has clearly not served enough people. 45 million Americans are on food stamps. America is a first world country with a debt economy. There are millions of people who are on the poverty line in America, and for a first world country to have so many people in poverty, that's not a acceptable thing. Now, it's a very classic type 8 thing to say, this isn't right, this isn't good enough, let's revolutionize that. Now, that's 8 at its best. And 8 can often tear down structures that don't work. Now, the challenge for 8 is not just to tear something down, it's also to be able to construct something and to create something. That's going to be an interesting challenge for somebody like Donald Trump. And he will, I believe, have to, engage. To be a true all-round leader, he would have to engage his heart as well as the willpower and as well as his, if you like, that strategic mental strategy of his. If he can do that, then there's every reason he could surprise us all and be a fabulous leader. Who knows? What the Enneagram points out is that we, all of us, have a potential for greatness. And in many ways, the Enneagram is the discipline of the Enneagram is to say, look, let's not rule out anybody's chances here, least of all our own. And so we're gonna see. It's not long now before.
Yes, I know. I think we can talk ages about Donald Trump and what the effect is. But I'm a timekeeper and I'm mindful about your time. So we continue and stay within the physical types with the 9, the Peacemaker. Obama, I was told, has a 9 type.
Well, it's an interesting one. Yeah, there's a feeling that what you might say is that 9 would be certainly in his chart. It's a little bit like with sun signs. You are influenced by one particular planet in your astrology, and then you are influenced by all of the planets, and that would be absolutely true. And in a way, with the Enneagram, you will have one main number, and then after that you will be influenced by all the numbers. So definitely, I'm not sure if he's a type 9, but there is this sense of 9 there. 9s are sometimes called the peacemakers. They are certainly more, in a way, I would say a little bit more, as the name suggests, they are more interested in a harmony than often the 8s are, for instance. The 8s like the cut and thrust of a challenge. They're not so interested in harmony. They're interested, more in being able to have an effect. And as Steve Jobs said, making a dent in the universe. Mm-hmm. With 9s, I like to think of 9s as they show up a little bit like conductors that orchestrate the flow. They are very good at diversity. They have a light touch very often. Their success often appears effortless. They're very win-win, as we all are when we're strong. They show up peaceful, but they have a core of steel running through them. You need to know that. It's like they're very, very strong. Somebody on a sporting example, I would say, is somebody like Roger Federer. Mm-hmm. Roger Federer barely sweats. He's always so suave and composed and as if nothing would ruffle him whatsoever. And yet, obviously, hugely tenacious and very, very effective. The challenges for the Peacemaker are sometimes being so wanting the experience of peace that they'll avoid conflict, and because of that, they sometimes are too withdrawn, and they can disappear in a way and not show up as fully as we hoped that they would show up. Mm-hmm. So with the Peacemaker, but when they show up, and oh my God, they are phenomenal, interesting people who add so much to our lives. I would also say they are hugely affirmative. Peacemakers are, and they empower us as well, but in a quiet way.
They are the closest to what you call the way of being. So their beingness can be so strong. And that is striking for doing people. That's how I experience to be with.
Yeah, I think that's
I really love that.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it, definitely.
So the next type is a 1. Now, I, again, just heard it that Hillary Clinton, which I thought she is an 8, but I heard that she has a type 1. So you know more, right?
Yeah, a lot of people feel this way. So the 1s are sometimes called the Perfectionists, or also the Reformer. Again, the name here points to the sort of role that we may like to play in our lives, and 1s do like to reform things. They like to make things better. They like to make the world a better place. They like to contribute to the greater good, and they often like to lead by example. So, for instance, when Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world," I think this would be a good example of of like the type 1, I'm going to be the example here. I'm going to set a new standard and let's see what happens. Now, Hillary Clinton is considered to be a type 1. I have to emphasize, I don't know if that's true. I have met her. I have spent some time with her. And what I would say I absolutely appreciate about this person is that she is highly motivated to contribute to the greater good. Mm-hmm. She has given a lifetime of service to supporting people in less fortunate situations. The challenges for type 1s are often that they can be so serious and committed about their purpose that they can come across sometimes over serious and finger pointing, and you often feel a little bit told off by these people. This isn't how they necessarily want to come across, but they can often come across cold and like we're having trouble warming to you. And because we're having trouble warming to you, we really don't know if you are. We want you to be a good person. We don't know if you are a good person.
If we can trust you. And asking us from a perspective. Sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, that's it. And so they can often become, in that sense, it's something that when I've coached people at type 1 in leadership positions, I'm often asking them to relax. Because ones say, well, look, I'm going to relax once I've made the world a better place. But it's sort of like, well, actually, if you relaxed, the world would be a better place. So actually, let's relax now. And actually, it will bring out the best in you. People will warm to you. And you'll come across less cold and less critical, which isn't, you don't mean to come across that way, but you can do that at 1. You can be authoritarian, stern, and ones have to be careful of what I call the gaze of disappointment. It's this feeling that ones set the standards for us all, but none of us can live up to the standards, least of all the ones, by the way. They can't even live up to their own standards, and that can cause trouble.
Yeah, I am also asking from a woman's perspective, and I look at Hillary Clinton, although here we can talk, ages about her, which we don't have the time for. But what I saw and what we all talked about, that, when a man is very pushy and not very relaxed, you still forgive easier. When a woman is very pushy, it's harder to take it for females as well as for males. So the pushy side, even if it had good content and goodwill, it pushes people away. And the warm heart that you said so wonderfully is missing. So there is no bridge, no connection, and people do want to have that from their leaders. It's always the same when I ask people, what is a good leader? It's a human leader, inspirational leader, a professional leader, of course, one who knows, but also who bridges the heart, hearts of people. And maybe that is the part that would have or was missing.
I think you make a great point. It feels a bit unfair, really, but
yes.
And I think in a sense it is unfair. I do. I'm very satisfied. She's a very good person, doing her best. But again, what the Enneagram is trying to show us is that if we can actually relate to our personality with awareness, with love, then hopefully we can also show up in the world in a more wholehearted way, which actually makes it easier for us to relate to each other.
Absolutely. I have a little story. It's a funny little story of a journalist who is a type 1. And that time I didn't know. And he was always so perfect about his clothes, and he was single. For years he wanted to be with a woman. But because he was so, really wanting it and so perfect about it and just doing his ultra best, it pushed people or it pushed women away. And one day he came back, I don't know, from Iraq. He came back and he was overly tired. His clothes looked completely dirty. And he just fall into his bed. And I looked at him and said, this is attracting a woman. You're so relaxed. You're so in your male energy. Because he was too tired to be perfect. He was too tired to try to be his best. And I said, just be like this all the time. Poor man, he didn't get that. But it was sweet to see that.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, we go to the emotional types. The 2, the 3, and the 4. The helper, the 2.
Yeah, so I think that helpers often show up with a style of leadership that Robert Greenleaf called servant leadership. And they make great servants. They understand that being a leader is all about contribution. They are very relationship focused. We, all of us, of course, are at our best relationship focused, but this is just one of the sort of great qualities of type 2 and the helper. So they make great team builders. They often have a coaching style of leadership as well. They aim to be also, I would say, very inclusive in the way they go about things. And, again, at their best, they're fabulous. The challenges for 2 are that because they focus on contribution and giving, sometimes they forget to receive, and they will often end up playing the martyr. And they martyr themselves as they try to lead. And this will often cause, for instance, physical ailments. It may also affect their closer relationships. They may find that they sacrifice their relationships closer to home because they put the team first, because they put their client first. It's almost like their more intimate relationships, their family relationships often can suffer as well. So they fall into martyrdom fundamentally.
So what would you say to a 2 leader? Are there leaders out there with a 2 type?
Yeah, there are leaders in the world. Absolutely. All the types make great leaders when they're healthy. So that's the great thing. I would say people who have a strong type 2 flavor in the world right now, I would say Desmond Tutu. I would say a Mother Teresa, an Albert Schweitzer. These types of people who are absolutely devoted to support and to help and to care. When you have the lead up to Christmas, there's all of the, Black Friday, Cyber Monday stuff going on. But then you also have Giving Tuesday. And Giving Tuesday is this great movement where it's all about saying, look, let's not just make the Christmas season about buying and getting and having, let's make it about giving. Now that to me is a wonderful example of a type 2 influence in leadership. Medicine Without Frontiers, I would say as well, another great example of a type 2 influence when it comes to leadership. So yeah, I would say the great key for type 2 leaders is to make sure that you are not martyring yourself, that you are allowing yourself to be helped as much as you are trying to help other people too.
Okay, to receive. So for them, the task is to receive as much as to give.
Essential for all of us, and essential definitely for 2s.
The 3, the accomplisher.
Yeah, now the accomplisher, the strengths, I suppose, if you like, of the 3, often action-orientated, success-orientated, very much about wanting to accomplish things, often a high work rate, task-focused, work smart, can-do attitude, getting the job done. They'll always deliver. They'll always get the work done. The challenge is work ethic. And in particular, from a leadership point of view, I would say, one of the challenges that I often make to my clients is I'll say, look, if you, as a leader, you are not paid just to be busy, you are paid to think. And if you haven't got any time to think because you're so busy doing everything, then fundamentally, how's the leadership going to happen? And I would say that's one of the great challenges for type 3s is your strength is that you do so much. Your challenge is that you do so much. And therefore, you need to take time to make sure that you are thinking and that you are not suffering from a chronic busyness.
Thinking and also feeling, if we come to the human quality of leadership, where 3s tend to lose their heart in their busyness?
Absolutely, yes. So, we almost end up as a doing machine here at 3, where we are so focused on the task that we forget that actually there are other people in our lives who are not maybe so interested in the task. I mean, the task's important, but they're interested in the relationships too. I mean, it's quite a good reminder for all of us, but particularly at type 3s, that at your funeral, it's highly unlikely that your list of accomplishments will be read out.
Yes.
It's going to be more the sort of person you were, your relationships, and the way you touched people, actually.
Yes.
That's what's going to be really important.
Well, they're wonderful examples when they're in power. And I've been told that Deepak Chopra is supposed to be a 3 and Oprah Winfrey, but again, this I don't know. Surely, I don't know if you know. I thought that Oprah Winfrey is more an A-type, but I heard that she is a 3-type.
Oprah Winfrey has her slogan is to live your best life. And I would say that really sits at 3. 3s want to be able to do their best, and I would say, but 3s and 8s have a lot in common as well, of course, Jeanine, as you know. So we can often show up in similar ways. What I do think is fabulous is, and this is one of the great strengths of 3s, is that at some point in the journey of your life, whereas you may have started out thinking about your own success, and maybe only your own success, along the way it occurs to you that actually it's more meaningful to think about your success and everybody else's success too. And so for that reason, I think that's another great strong quality of Oprah Winfrey, for example. So in her chart, I would expect to see a lot of 3 and 8. I think that's fair. I think she surrounds herself with a lot of 8 people, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think she's needed that at different times because she's one brave woman and she's needed some support along the way, that's for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. 4, are there any 4 leaders out there? Now, that's interesting for me because I have a 4 type.
Yeah, well, now, I would say one of the great qualities of 4s would be what I would call authentic leadership. A leadership which comes from expressing yourself authentically, but also a leadership style that encourages everybody else to be authentic too. And now this is a curious one because I would say, for instance, in my work in large organizations, I would say it's rare to find many type 4 leaders, partly because there aren't many type 4s that are drawn to large organizations. One of the reasons why they're not drawn to large organizations is this concern that I will become corporate and that I won't be able to be myself. So often where you might find type 4s would be in the design department. So, wherever there is some creativity, this might be where you will find your type 4s, where there's a chance to express yourselves. This is where it will be. Type 4s often have a charismatic style because in a way we are greatly inspired by their authentic touch and the fact that they can be, if you like, so creative in this sense. So their leadership comes from, I think, from their example. They have huge emotional intelligence, and they are soulful, I would say, about the way they go about their work. They are also very good at creating creative workplaces. So whereas many of us will work in hyperactive workplaces, they will create creative workplaces. The challenge, I would say, for type 4s, who are sometimes called the individualists, is that the emphasis on authenticity can lead to a self-absorption where we are so concerned with making sure we come across okay that we sometimes forget about others as well, and to include that. But again, this is just when we're not at our best. Once again, fours who are very self-aware understand this, they know about this, and then they compensate by making sure that they balance out the I and the we.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The mental types, the 5, the investigator.
Yeah, well, now the 5s, they're amazing. I mean, these are great fun people. I've been doing some Enneagram and leadership work at Google. I've also done a little bit of work at IBM. And now these sorts of companies, particularly the high-tech companies, they are often populated by type 5s. Type 5s are called the investigators. And as the name suggests, they dive deep. They like to observe, to watch, to find, to see new ways, really, of doing things. You will often find the 5s are in the research departments, R&D departments of organizations, and they're hugely insightful. They are the type that I would the phrase thought leadership comes to mind here. They research beautifully. They're great problem solvers, and they understand that the future isn't planned; it's imagined. And people like your Bill Gates, for example, are often thought of as having that sort of type 5 place, and it would be the same at Google as well. The challenge of 5 is that, as you've said, this is what's called sometimes a mental type or what we call a head type. And what that essentially means is that the imbalance can express itself through the head in particular. And at 5, we can sometimes be so absorbed in the mental work that we forget to relate to others. I know, for instance, at Google and IBM and Facebook and places like this, one of the common complaints is that the research and development team forget to tell the rest of the organization what they've discovered recently.
Yes, I heard that too, yes.
Yeah, and that's a great example. It's like, oh my God, we forgot to tell anybody. We're coming up with these amazing insights and we just forgot to say anything. But the leadership here again, I think of thought leadership here. And these people can be great artists, amazing artists, and thereby they're showing us ways to think in different ways. Everybody can be great artists, of course, but I would say at 5, it's making sure that you're an interesting quality I'd say at 5 as well is that one of the strengths is the open-mindedness, but also one of the challenges of 5 is our closed-mindedness and how we can sometimes be a closed book.
I had a 5 manager for team coaching, and when we worked on one-to-one sessions, we were so close. We had so much fun. When he was in the group, I was always looking at him saying, where are you? Where are you? Come back. So he would automatically withdraw, which didn't happen at all when we had one-to-one sessions. So there I could see it. What a great guy. I really loved working with him. He was so sensitive and so open and so curious. We had a lot of laughter. I didn't think that. I was always thinking like I'm emotional, so I might have a difficulty with a 5 type. But I really did love the work with him. It was really great. The 6,
Yeah,
the Loyalist.
and that's also just to point out there as well, you know, with your awareness, you know something about the Enneagram, so you're able to meet him in a different way as well, which I think that's the key to the Enneagram, you know, it works. So type 6, sometimes called the Loyalist. Now these types are great team players, I would say. Also, they're called the Loyalists a little bit like 2s. They give themselves fully to the cause, and they like to give themselves to a cause that is greater than themselves. 6s are known for being, well, it's like there's a sort of a skepticism here at 6 that's often characteristic of type 6s. It's something they have to manage. It's like it's a sense of skepticism. Now that skepticism can be very, very useful for troubleshooting, for instance. And sometimes having somebody on a leadership team who's a type 6, they can be the ones who are happy to play devil's advocate, and they're happy to troubleshoot, and that's a wonderful thing. They are guardians. They serve and protect the best interests of the group. I was very fortunate to have a co-director for a number of years who worked with me, who's a type 6, and he was really a great right-hand man, and I felt that he really did everything that he could within his power to support and protect me. And so was just a huge thing. They are head types. So sometimes they can be over skeptical. Sometimes they can overthink things. Sometimes they find themselves in two minds about too many things. They can experience an analysis paralysis. The inner doubt means they sometimes have an authority problem. They rail against other people's authority, and they don't trust their own authority enough. So sometimes 6s are reluctant to step forward and be the leader they could be. Sometimes they play it safe too much. But once again, when 6s get past their own psychology and are genuinely guided by their higher mind, I would say they are hugely insightful, just fabulous. I mean, really, as I say, they are very much about the best interests of the group, and yeah, fabulous to have as leaders.
I always call them a pearl in the ocean, because once they open up and trust you, they are so not just loyal, there's a purity in them, and there's a sensitivity in them, and the connection is so pure and so beautiful. So I also do love the 6s, yes. Yeah. The 7.
Mm-hmm. Well, the 7 are called the Enthusiasts, and so I think the name gives it away, really. They are often forward-thinking. They have an unstoppable energy. They're often entrepreneurs. They love to, a bit like 3s, they love just to get things done. They are a mental type, and they excel at possibility thinking. They have their finger on the pulse. They're often ahead of the curve. They spot the trends. They're happy to be early adopters and to try stuff. And never a dull moment, I would say, with the 7s. The challenge, I would say, is that they're so enthusiastic that they often are too enthusiastic about too many things. And one of the things they often have to do is to be willing to fundamentally rein it in a little bit. And they can be out of focus. At their best, they're super focused, and when they're in their challenge, it's that they are scattered. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. They would be scattered, they're spinning plates, and they often are great at starting things, but in the challenge, they don't always follow things through. But again, at their best, superb, great. They energize people. I think this is one of the great qualities of sevens. They energize us, and they have this positivity, which, when it's honest, is truly, truly inspiring. And I would say I think a Mozart, for instance, I often think of Mozart as this sort of great...
Yeah, you're right. Dalai Lama also.
Something like that. I think another great example possibly would be somebody like a Richard Branson.
Okay, yes.
Somebody maybe like that. But it's that entrepreneurial, let's go for it. Often with sevens, you get a feeling that they don't really go to work. They're just having fun. And that doesn't mean they don't know what hard work is. They'll work hard. They keep it light, and that's one of their strengths. You would be mistaken to think that there isn't any depth there. That can be one of the accusations of sevens, that you're happy. It's a strange accusation of sevens, but they're happy people, and often it's like, well, you're too happy to be deep. But in my experience, again, when you're healthy, everybody's deep. When you're healthy, everybody has depth to them.
Absolutely.
And so do the sevens. They're great.
In the team building session, we had a 7, and it was a running gag, because when it came to ideas, she would always say, I have a great idea. And by then we knew that she's a 7, so it was a running gag. We would always laugh, say, yeah, of course you have a great idea. But at the same time, while she was so enthusiastic, she also shared her tears, and I think that was so great. It was both.
Lovely.
It was the pain and the joy, and I love that. So.
Yeah, that's a great example. Lovely.